Kelvin, put that belt down.
Still ghetto.
Thug life, baby.
Just watch it. Just watch it.
My adversaries fly like hoes, fully eradicate my foes. My lyrics explode on contact. Gaming you hoes, you up, but mama's only son. But the phony niggas of the world say my name, watch bitches come. That's why I'm ready, stay watching now, figure. Increase speed, make you motherfuckers bleed from your mouth quicker. Just all these niggas that you run with.
Welcome back, guys, to What If. In this episode of What If, I will be going over the Kelvin Gastelum vs Israel Adesanya fight and ask the question, what if Kelvin Gastelum defeats Israel Adesanya? How could he do it, and where would he go from there, and how would he do from there on? So with that being said, let's continue on. Kelvin Gastelum is being majorly overlooked in this fight, and obviously it shouldn't come as a surprise when your opponent is about 5 inches taller than you, has over 8 inches of reach on you. Add on top that Israel Adesanya is just a world-class kickboxer, unbelievable striker, probably the best in the middleweight division currently. You would have to believe that that striker should be able to keep the much shorter and stockier man at a distance and pick him apart for 5 rounds. But as Conor McGregor once said, it's a long 25 minutes in there, and Kelvin Gastelum in this matchup definitely has the power advantage. Kelvin, for being the fighter that is not the lightest on his feet, he knows how he can slickly get in on the outside, stay there, and finish his attacks with devastating power. Without a question in this matchup, Kelvin Gastelum having the greater power, we can never really count him out, even in the stand-up department. The main defenses of Israel Adesanya is just moving and posting up on his opponents. When Kelvin Gastelum comes forward, he's pretty slick at getting his head off of the center line, stepping into range with a punch, and then leading in with his left hand. And once the left hand lands, only time will tell what can happen. But definitely, Israel Adesanya does not have the power advantage when it comes to this matchup. For example, against Anderson Silva, he loaded up on his hardest and best shots, and he couldn't really buckle him, he couldn't really sting him, he couldn't really hurt him all that much. And when it comes to the Anderson Silva fight, I don't really know how much he intended to hurt Anderson. I think he wanted to go in there and probably just beat him convincingly and be always one step ahead, but I don't really see the intentions of truly hurting Anderson like that. So that fight may not be a good indicator, but overall I think that without a question Kelvin just has that advantage. And for instance, in the Uriah Hall fight, where he could depend on his wrestling to be there and work for his success, I believe that could happen in the same way. With Israel Adesanya thus far showing great defense when it comes to the takedowns, as it showed in, for example, the Derek Brunson fight, we still have to see him go in there against somebody as well balanced as Kelvin. So with Derek Brunson, it was pretty obvious that he was looking for that takedown and he was pretty desperate for it, leaving himself exposed and walking into knees, for example. I don't really see that with Kelvin Gastelum. He's going to be pretty much so more balanced, more thought out, more methodical, and that will bring a bit more of a mystique to this matchup. So overall, I don't think that Kelvin Gastelum should be that much underrated as he is currently because of his slick movement, head movement especially, great power, and wrestling background. I think that he can definitely pull an upset in this matchup. Assuming he defeats Israel Adesanya, this will make him the new interim 185-pound world champion. From there, the only possible matchup that should be happening will be the fight with Robert Whittaker. Unfortunately for us, that fight got scrapped at the last minute and we didn't really get to see it back when it was intended. So for Kelvin Gastelum to go in there and fight Robert Whittaker again, this time around having an actual belt that he just isn't posing with, this will generate a lot more buzz, a lot more hype around this fight. Because for the first time going into this match, this was a pretty good matchup, but there was not really that much hype or storyline behind it. Now it will have that storyline and it will just make this fight even bigger. Against Robert Whittaker, how could it do? Because these two guys are very well balanced in both the stand-up game and the ground game. We have Robert Whittaker, who has better cardio, has better footwork, and then on the other hand we have Kelvin Gastelum, who in my opinion has better head movement, better power. And I would have to say that Kelvin Gastelum is a bit bigger and physically stronger than Robert Whittaker. So in potential clinch exchanges, potential takedown attempts, I would have to believe that Kelvin Gastelum should be getting the better of him. Now, so far for Robert Whittaker, he hasn't really shown that many weaknesses in the middleweight division. Obviously, his last loss was against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who was able to just keep him at a certain range, pick him apart, and finish him off. With Kelvin Gastelum, I don't think that is going to be happening at all. Kelvin Gastelum is a bit more of a plotter, and sits on his shots a lot more. With Robert Whittaker, he tends to throw a lot more feints and not engage as much as Kelvin Gastelum because of the fact that he can depend on his stamina to be there, his endurance to be there, and being able to go all 5 rounds is something that will make him a lot more patient and a lot more comfortable in certain fights. When Kelvin Gastelum fights, for example, I cannot say with certainty that Kelvin can go in there, fight all 5 rounds with the same output, with the same consistency as he started the fight with. When we take a look at Chris Weidman, for example, in that fight, he was pretty much getting zoned out because of his height and reach. Add on top that Chris Weidman was able to take him down and make him work off of the back, try to get back up. That wasted a lot of energy from Kelvin, and that really helped him, or I should say, accelerate the fact that he was going to be slowing down. By the 3rd round, he was just obviously slowed down tremendously, and Weidman was able to go in there and finish him. However, with Robert Whittaker, I do not see him showing that wrestling presence. I don't think that he's as good as Chris Weidman when it comes to the wrestling department, so I don't really see Whittaker being taken down all that much, which makes me believe that Kelvin Gastelum is not going to be dealing with a lot of takedown attempts in this matchup. Now, if Kelvin Gastelum is not going to be dealing with a lot of takedown attempts, a lot of power, or a lot of physicality, then what will he be dealing with? When it comes to Robert, as I said, very light on his feet, pretty smart guy, pretty methodical, very calculated, very tough physically as well. Can definitely take a couple hits, as he did against Yoel Romero, and I think if he can take a lot of damage from Yoel Romero, he can definitely take a couple hits from Kelvin Gastelum. For Kelvin to knock out Robert Whittaker, it is definitely going to be early on in the fight. The longer the fight goes on, I supremely doubt that Kelvin can go in there and still generate enough power to finish him. Add on top that Robert Whittaker is a tremendous distance controller with his teep kicks movement, which makes me believe that in the end, the fighter that is going to be standing tall would definitely be Robert Whittaker. So by the end of it, I would have to believe that Kelvin Gastelum wouldn't really defeat Robert Whittaker. I would have to say that his chances of defeating him are pretty much in the first 2 rounds. From there on, I highly doubt that he can catch him with enough power, with enough force to crucially damage him in the matchup, so I would have to lean with Robert Whittaker. So with that concluded, assuming Kelvin Gastelum loses to Israel Adesanya, how would Israel Adesanya do against Robert Whittaker? But that is another video for a different time. For now, this has been What If Kelvin Gastelum Defeats Israel Adesanya. As always, I have been Kenan from Kenan KTV, signing off. Later.